The betrayal started 3 weeks before I was supposed to say I do. I had spent 2 years building the biggest campaign of my career, working nights and weekends, missing dinners with Ryan, skipping family gatherings, sacrificing everything to prove I deserved my place at Thompson Marketing Group. I was the only openly gay senior director in the entire firm. Every victory felt like I had to work 3 times harder than everyone else just to be seen as equal. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered on a random Tuesday afternoon when I came home early from a client meeting. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard sounds coming from our bedroom. When I opened that door, my entire world shattered into pieces nobody could ever put back together. I found Ryan in bed with my father. Not a stranger, not some random affair. My own father. The man who told me at 16 that being gay was just a phase. The same man who refused to speak to me for 2 years after I came out. Now here he was, destroying the one relationship I thought was solid and real. My story will touch you. If you have ever been or felt judged just for being who you are, or know someone who went through this, you will identify and want to follow along because the ending is impactful. Subscribe to this channel and help give voice to stories that should no longer remain silent. My name is Marcus Chen, and I spent 10 years at Thompson Marketing Group climbing a ladder that seemed designed to keep people like me at the bottom. I started as a junior copywriter right out of college. Back then, I kept my personal life completely separate from work. I learned quickly that being gay in corporate America meant constantly performing a version of yourself that made others comfortable. My voice was too soft, they said. My presentations lacked assertiveness. I dressed too well, paid too much attention to details, cared too much about aesthetics. Every single trait that made me good at marketing became a weapon used against me. The microaggressions were constant and exhausting. During meetings, male colleagues would talk over me, dismiss my ideas, then present the exact same concepts 10 minutes later to applause and promotions. When I finally made it to senior director at 32, I overheard 2 vice presidents in the break room discussing whether I was the right fit to represent the firm at IndustryCon. One of them said I might give clients the wrong impression. The other laughed and agreed that they needed someone more traditionally masculine for those situations. I stood there frozen, coffee cup in hand, pretending I had not heard every single word. I met Ryan at a charity gala 3 years ago. He worked in finance, came from old money, and had that effortless confidence that comes from never having to prove your worth to anyone. He pursued me relentlessly. Flowers at my office, surprise lunch deliveries, tickets to shows I mentioned wanting to see. For the first time in my life, I felt chosen. Not tolerated. Not accepted despite who I was. Actually chosen because of who I was. Ryan told me he loved how passionate I became when talking about campaigns, how my eyes lit up discussing color theory and brand psychology, how I noticed tiny details nobody else saw. It made me feel like all the parts of myself I had learned to hide were actually beautiful. My father Gerald had barely spoken to me since I came out at 16. We maintained a cold, distant relationship built on obligation and awkward holiday dinners. He was a retired construction company owner, a traditional man who believed in hard work, sports, and very specific ideas about me. When I told him about Ryan, he surprised me by agreeing to meet him. That dinner went better than expected. Gerald seemed almost impressed by Ryan, asking about his work, his family background, his education. Over the following months, my father started calling more often, showing up at Sunday brunches Ryan and I hosted, even offering to help pay for the wedding. I thought maybe, finally, he was trying to accept me, to build the relationship we never had. I was so desperate for his approval that I convinced myself his coldness was thawing. How stupid I was. The wedding planning consumed every free moment I had outside work. Ryan wanted everything perfect. A ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, 300 guests, a reception at the most exclusive country club in the city. His family had money and connections, and they insisted on making it the social event of the season. My mother was thrilled, crying happy tears at every cake tasting and venue walkthrough. Even Gerald participated, offering opinions on catering and helping coordinate logistics. I felt like I was finally getting the family acceptance I had craved my entire life. At work, things were simultaneously reaching a critical point. Thompson Marketing Group was competing for the Monroe Industries account, a massive contract worth $47 million over 3 years. Monroe Industries manufactured sustainable building materials and wanted to completely rebrand for the modern market. The pitch process was brutal. 5 agencies competing, 3 rounds of presentations, endless revisions, and strategy sessions. I led our team, developing a campaign that positioned Monroe as the future of ethical construction. We called it Building Tomorrow. Every element was designed to appeal to environmentally conscious consumers while maintaining credibility with traditional contractors and developers. My team worked around the clock. I missed dress rehearsals, florist appointments, meetings with the wedding planner. Ryan grew increasingly frustrated, accusing me of caring more about work than our relationship. We fought constantly those last few weeks. He said I was obsessed, that no job was worth sacrificing our life together. I tried explaining that this contract could change everything for me. That landing Monroe would prove I deserved my position, that I was not just a diversity hire or a token, that I could lead major accounts just as well as anyone else in the firm. Thompson Marketing Group had a culture problem that everyone knew about, but nobody discussed openly. The executive team was entirely straight white men in their 50s and 60s. They hired diverse talent at lower levels for appearances, but promotions always went to people who fit their narrow definition of leadership. I watched less qualified colleagues move up while I stayed stuck, delivering exceptional results that were praised but never rewarded with actual advancement. My sexuality was never mentioned directly. Instead, I heard phrases like cultural fit and client comfort and traditional values. The discrimination was sophisticated enough to be deniable, but obvious enough to be crushing. 3 weeks before the wedding, we won the first round of the Monroe pitch. 5 agencies cut to 3. The final presentation was scheduled for 2 weeks later, just days before my ceremony. I was exhausted, running on coffee and anxiety. Ryan barely spoke to me. My mother kept calling about last-minute details I had no time to handle. Gerald offered to take over some wedding coordination, meeting with vendors on my behalf. I was grateful for the help, even though part of me found it strange that he was suddenly so invested. But I pushed those doubts aside. I wanted to believe he had changed, that he finally accepted me. The night before the final Monroe presentation, I stayed at the office until 3 in the morning perfecting our deck. Every slide had to be flawless. Every transition smooth. Every word carefully chosen to resonate with Monroe executives. My team had done incredible work, and I refused to let us lose because of some tiny detail I overlooked. When I finally drove home, I felt confident. We had the strongest campaign, the best strategy, the most innovative approach. All I had to do was deliver a perfect presentation, and the contract would be ours. The final presentation to Monroe Industries happened on a Tuesday morning at their corporate headquarters downtown. Our team arrived an hour early to set up. The conference room was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 12 Monroe executives sat around a table that probably cost more than my annual salary. I stood at the front, my presentation displayed on 3 large screens, and felt completely in my element. This was what I was born to do. I presented for 45 minutes. Every slide landed exactly as intended. I explained how Building Tomorrow would position Monroe as leaders in sustainable construction, how we would target both commercial developers and residential consumers, how our digital marketing strategy would reach younger demographics while maintaining trust with established industry contacts. The Monroe executives asked tough questions. I answered every single one with confidence and specific data. By the time we finished, I could see approval in their faces. The chief marketing officer even smiled and nodded at several points during my closing remarks. Walking out of that building, I knew we had won. My team celebrated in the parking lot, everyone talking over each other with excitement. This was my moment. The achievement that would finally prove I belonged in leadership. That being gay did not make me less capable, less strategic, less qualified. I called Ryan to share the news. He congratulated me, but his voice sounded strange, distant. When I asked if everything was okay, he said he was just stressed about wedding details. We agreed to have dinner that night and talk through everything. That afternoon, I received an email from Monroe Industries' chief marketing officer. They wanted to schedule a follow-up meeting in 2 days to discuss contract terms and implementation timeline. I forwarded it to my boss, James Thompson, who called me into his office immediately. He closed the door and sat behind his enormous desk with an expression I could not quite read. He congratulated me on the presentation, said Monroe executives were very impressed. Then he dropped a bomb that made my stomach turn. James said that while I would continue leading the campaign strategy, they were assigning Robert Patterson as the official account director. Robert was a vice president, straight, married with 3 kids, and had worked at the firm for 8 years. He was also mediocre at best, known for taking credit for other people's work and coasting on relationships rather than talent. James explained that Monroe Industries was a traditional company, and having Robert as the face of the account would make them more comfortable during the contract negotiation phase. Once everything was signed, I would get full credit. But for now, appearances mattered. I sat there unable to speak. This was not subtle discrimination. This was explicit. They were literally telling me I was too gay to represent the firm with a major client. That my sexuality made Monroe uncomfortable. That despite creating the entire campaign, delivering the winning presentation, and securing their interest, I had to step aside for someone more acceptable. James must have seen the rage building in my face because he quickly added that this was just politics, that I should not take it personally, that business required compromise. He promised I would get a significant bonus when the contract closed, as if money could compensate for being erased. I left his office and went straight to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall while my hands shook with anger and humiliation. 10 years of proving myself. 10 years of working twice as hard. 10 years of being told I was not quite right, not quite enough. And here it was again, the same rejection wearing a different mask. I wanted to quit on the spot, to walk out and never come back. But I also knew that reaction was exactly what they expected from me. That it would confirm every stereotype about emotional, unstable, unprofessional. So I took deep breaths, splashed cold water on my face, and went back to my desk like nothing had happened. That evening, I drove home planning how to tell Ryan about this latest humiliation. Maybe he would understand why this wedding felt less important than securing my professional future. Why I had sacrificed so much time and energy fighting for recognition that kept getting stolen from me. I parked in our building garage and took the elevator up, mentally rehearsing what I would say. The apartment door was unlocked. I walked in expecting to find Ryan cooking dinner or watching television. Instead, the living room was empty, quiet in a way that felt wrong. I heard sounds coming from our bedroom. Low voices. Movement. My brain tried to supply innocent explanations even as my feet carried me down the hallway. Maybe Ryan was on a phone call. Maybe he was watching something on his laptop. Maybe I was being paranoid and jealous like he sometimes accused me of being. I reached for the bedroom door handle. It turned easily. The door swung open. Ryan was in our bed with my father. Not talking. Not having some innocent conversation I had misinterpreted. They were together in a way that made the betrayal absolutely undeniable. Time seemed to stop. I stood there unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process what I was seeing. Ryan saw me first. His face went white. He jumped up, grabbing for sheets, stammering excuses that made no sense. My father turned slowly, and what I saw in his eyes was not shame or regret. It was contempt. That same cold disapproval I had seen my entire life, now mixed with something darker. I must have made a sound, though I do not remember. My legs stopped working properly. I backed out of the room, down the hallway, through the apartment. Ryan followed, pulling on clothes, voice rising in panic. He tried explaining, said it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that he loved me and wanted to marry me. Every word felt like another knife. My father appeared in the bedroom doorway, fully dressed now, looking almost bored. He told Ryan to stop embarrassing himself. Then he looked at me and said something I will never forget. He said I should have known better than to think someone like Ryan would actually want to spend his life with someone like me. I grabbed my keys and left, drove aimlessly for hours while my phone exploded with calls and messages. Ryan sent dozens of texts begging me to come back, to let him explain, to not throw away what we had built. I blocked his number. My mother called asking what happened, why Ryan was calling her crying about calling off the wedding. I could not speak, could not form words to describe what I had just witnessed. Eventually, I ended up at a hotel near the office, checked in for the night, and sat on the bed staring at nothing while my entire world collapsed. The next morning, I showed up at work on time, dressed perfectly, with no visible evidence of the destruction happening inside me. I had a job to do. Monroe Industries was expecting final contract negotiations. Robert Patterson was already in James' office going over strategy. I joined the meeting and contributed as expected, speaking clearly about campaign details and implementation phases. Nobody asked how I was feeling. Nobody noticed anything wrong. I was too good at performing normalcy after years of practice hiding pain behind professionalism. Over the following days, I moved through work like a robot. I avoided calls from my mother, who wanted explanations I could not provide. I refused to speak to Ryan or my father. The wedding was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. Invitations had been sent, deposits paid, flowers ordered, guests making travel arrangements. I should have canceled everything immediately. But part of me, the part that had been humiliated and dismissed and betrayed one too many times, started forming a different plan. A darker plan. One that would make everyone who hurt me pay in the most public way possible. Robert Patterson was officially announced as the Monroe Industries account director at a company-wide meeting. James Thompson praised my campaign development work and promised I would remain heavily involved throughout implementation. The words felt hollow. Everyone in that room knew what had really happened. That I had been too visibly gay to represent the firm with a conservative client. Several colleagues avoided eye contact afterward. Nobody said anything directly, but I could feel their pity and their relief that discrimination happened to me instead of them. Sarah Kim, another senior director, caught me in the hallway and whispered that what they did was wrong. Then she walked away before anyone saw us talking. That was the extent of workplace solidarity. The Monroe contract negotiation took 3 days of intense meetings at their headquarters. I sat in every session, providing detailed answers about campaign strategy, media buying plans, content calendars, and performance metrics. Robert mostly nodded and smiled, occasionally repeating things I had just said as if they were his own ideas. Monroe executives directed most technical questions to me, but discussed contract terms and business arrangements with Robert. The division was deliberate and obvious. I was the talented worker bee. Robert was the acceptable face of leadership. By the end of day 3, we had a signed agreement worth $47 million. Thompson Marketing Group was celebrating their biggest contract in 5 years. I had created it, pitched it, and secured it. Robert got the credit and the promotion near vice president. During those same 3 days, I received constant messages from Ryan. He showed up at my hotel twice. Security escorted him out both times. He sent emails explaining that his relationship with my father started months ago, that it began as Gerald seeking advice about accepting me, that conversations became confessions, that confessions became something neither of them intended. He claimed they tried to stop multiple times, that he truly loved me and wanted to marry me despite also being involved with Gerald. The explanations made everything worse. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a calculated, ongoing betrayal by the 2 people who should have protected me. My mother finally cornered me at the office parking garage on Friday evening. She had been calling nonstop for days. I had ignored every attempt to reach me. When she appeared next to my car, I could see she had been crying. She begged me to talk to her, to explain what happened, to tell her why the wedding was in jeopardy. I stood there unable to form words. How do you tell your mother that her husband betrayed you with your fiancé? That the man she has been married to for 35 years destroyed your life in the most intimate way possible? I finally said that Gerald could explain everything, got in my car, and drove away while she called after me. That night, alone in a hotel room that had become my temporary home, I made a decision. I was not going to cancel the wedding. I was not going to quietly call off the ceremony and let Ryan and Gerald escape public consequences for what they did. I was not going to protect them from embarrassment or scandal. They had humiliated me in private. I would return that humiliation in public. At the altar, in front of 300 guests, with every single person they cared about watching. If I was going down, I was taking them with me. I spent the weekend preparing. I contacted several wedding vendors and confirmed that everything would proceed as planned. I called my mother back and told her the ceremony was still happening, that she should stop worrying, that I had processed my feelings and wanted to move forward. She cried with relief. I let Ryan think I was considering reconciliation, responding to one of his messages with a brief note saying we needed to talk before making final decisions. He immediately called, and I let it go to voicemail. Control was essential. I needed everyone to believe the wedding might actually happen. Monday morning, I received notification that Monroe Industries had officially signed the contract and released the first payment to Thompson Marketing Group. James Thompson called an emergency meeting to celebrate and discuss account logistics. The entire executive team gathered in the main conference room. James announced that Robert Patterson would be leading Monroe with full budget authority and staff assignments. Then he thanked me for my contributions and said I would be receiving a $20,000 bonus for my work developing the campaign. $20,000 for a $47 million contract I created from nothing. The humiliation was calculated and complete. After the meeting, Robert approached my desk with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He told me I should be grateful for the opportunity to work on such a prestigious account. That many talented people never get their campaigns implemented at this scale. That I should focus on the positive rather than dwelling on titles and recognition. He suggested that perhaps my attitude about the situation reflected the same lack of professional maturity that made clients uncomfortable with me representing the firm. I sat there frozen while he walked away, his words hanging in the air like poison. That evening, I met with Ryan at a coffee shop near our old apartment. He arrived looking hopeful, probably expecting me to announce I was ready to forgive him and move forward with the wedding. Instead, I told him I needed time to process everything but did not want to disappoint our families by canceling. That we should go through with the ceremony for appearance sake, then decide privately afterward whether to actually file the marriage paperwork. Ryan grabbed my hands across the table, tears in his eyes, promising he would spend the rest of his life making this up. I let him believe reconciliation was possible. I needed him compliant and unsuspecting for what was coming. My father was harder to manipulate. He had been avoiding my calls since the discovery. When I finally reached him 2 days before the wedding, he was defensive and dismissive. He said what happened was between adults and none of my business. That Ryan had come to him seeking guidance about our relationship and things developed naturally. That I should be mature enough to handle complicated situations without drama. I told him I wanted him to walk me down the aisle as planned. That despite everything, he was still my father and I needed him there. The lie tasted bitter, but Gerald agreed. Probably because refusing would require explaining to my mother why. The night before the wedding, Thompson Marketing Group held a happy hour to celebrate the Monroe contract. Robert was the center of attention, accepting congratulations and praise for work he did not do. I stood in the corner nursing a drink and watching him perform. Sarah Kim approached and quietly asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, that this was just business, that I had learned not to take these things personally. She looked like she wanted to say more, but stopped herself. The system protected people like Robert and punished people like me for pointing out the injustice. Everyone knew it. Nobody challenged it. I left the happy hour early and drove to the botanical gardens where the ceremony would take place the next day. The venue was beautiful. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arch covered in flowers at the end of a long aisle, string lights hanging from trees. Everything Ryan and I had planned during those hopeful months when I still believed love could conquer prejudice and betrayal. I stood there alone, looking at the space where my life was supposed to change for the better. Tomorrow, it would change, just not in any way anyone expected. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Clear blue sky, temperature in the mid 70s, gentle breeze moving through the botanical gardens. Guests began arriving at 4 in the afternoon. 300 people dressed in formal attire, excited to witness what everyone believed would be a beautiful ceremony between two men who had overcome prejudice and family resistance to build a life together. If only they knew the truth. My mother was radiant, greeting guests and crying happy tears. Gerald stood near the entrance in his expensive suit, playing the role of proud father. Ryan waited in a side room with his groomsmen, probably nervous, but also relieved that I had seemingly forgiven him. I got dressed in another room with my own attendants. My best friend Kevin kept trying to get me to smile, cracking jokes about married life and honeymoon. He had no idea what was coming. Nobody did. I had spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment with the same obsessive focus I brought to the Monroe Industries campaign. Every detail planned, every word rehearsed, every outcome anticipated. I looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting my tie one final time. The man staring back looked calm, composed, ready. Inside, I was burning. At 5 o'clock, the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Guests took their seats. The string quartet started playing. Ryan walked down the aisle first with his parents, taking his position at the altar. He looked handsome in his tailored tuxedo, smiling at friends and family as he passed. Gerald appeared at my side, offering his arm. This was the moment we had practiced. Father walking son down the aisle. Symbolic blessing and acceptance. I took his arm and we began the slow walk toward Ryan, toward the arch covered in white roses, toward the moment that would destroy them both. Every step felt surreal. Faces turned to watch us pass. Some people smiled. Others dabbed at tears. My mother sat in the front row, clutching a tissue, overwhelmed with joy. I could see James Thompson from my office, several colleagues, friends from college, Ryan family members who had welcomed me into their wealthy, privileged world. They all believed they were witnessing a triumph of love. What they were actually about to see was justice. We reached the altar. Gerald released my arm and moved to sit next to my mother in the front row. Ryan took my hands, his eyes wet with emotion. The officiant, a friend of Ryan family, smiled warmly and began the ceremony with traditional words about love, commitment, and partnership. I let him speak uninterrupted for several minutes. Let everyone settle into the comfortable rhythm of a standard wedding. Let Ryan relax, thinking he had gotten away with his betrayal. Let Gerald believe his contempt for me would remain private. Then, when the officiant asked if anyone had objections to this union, I spoke. I said I had an objection. The officiant looked confused, probably thinking I was making a joke. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Ryan squeezed my hands, his face showing concern. I pulled away from him, turned to face the 300 guests, and began speaking in a clear, steady voice that carried across the garden. I said I wanted to share a story before we continued. That everyone deserved to know the truth about the relationship they came here to celebrate. Ryan whispered my name, panic rising in his voice. I ignored him. I described coming home early from work 3 weeks ago. Walking into our bedroom, finding Ryan in bed with my father. Gasps erupted from the crowd. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Ryan started crying, saying it was not what it looked like, begging me to stop. I kept speaking. I explained how this was not a single mistake, but an ongoing affair that had lasted months. How Gerald had used reconciliation as a cover for seducing my fiancé. How Ryan had claimed to love me while sleeping with the one person whose acceptance I had craved my entire life. The betrayal was complete and calculated. Everyone needed to know. Gerald stood up, his face purple with rage. He tried to interrupt, to call me a liar, to shut me down. I looked directly at him and said I had evidence. Text messages between him and Ryan. Hotel receipts. Ryan had kept everything on his phone, probably never imagining I would find it. I had spent 2 weeks going through his accounts after he gave me his passwords months ago. Every message saved. Every receipt photographed. Every piece of proof documented. If Gerald wanted to challenge me, I would display it all right now for everyone to see. The crowd descended into chaos. People shouting questions. Ryan sobbing at the altar. My mother confronting Gerald, hitting his chest with her fists while he tried to restrain her. Ryan family members looked horrified. Friends sat frozen in shock. The officiant stood there completely lost about what to do. I let the chaos build for a moment, then raised my voice and said there was more. That this wedding was not the only place where I had been betrayed recently. I turned to James Thompson, who sat near the middle with his wife and several colleagues from the firm. I explained how I had spent 10 years at Thompson Marketing Group being passed over for promotions, excluded from opportunities, and dismissed because of my sexuality. How I had just developed and secured the largest contract in company history worth $47 million. How the firm immediately replaced me with a less qualified straight man to serve as the account phase because my being gay made the client uncomfortable. How I received a $20,000 bonus while Robert Patterson got a promotion and full credit for my work. The discrimination was explicit, documented, and illegal. James stood up, trying to object, saying this was neither the time nor place for workplace grievances. I cut him off. I explained that over the past 2 weeks, while everyone thought I was processing my broken engagement, I had actually been working with Monroe Industries directly. That I had contacted their chief marketing officer and explained the situation at Thompson Marketing Group. That Monroe executives were shocked to learn I had been removed from account leadership due to sexuality-based discrimination. That they believed they were working with the actual campaign creator, not a substitute designed to make them comfortable. I told James and the assembled guests that Monroe Industries had a strong corporate diversity policy, that they prided themselves on inclusive practices, that learning their marketing agency had discriminated against their lead strategist violated everything Monroe stood for as a company. So the chief marketing officer had called me personally 3 days ago. We had a long conversation about my experience, my vision for their brand, and my professional future. Monroe Industries made me an offer. They wanted me to join their internal marketing team as their new vice president of brand strategy. The salary was twice what Thompson Marketing Group paid me. The title was what I deserved. The respect was guaranteed. The reveal hit James Thompson like a physical blow. His face went white. He stammered something about contracts and legal obligations. I smiled and explained that I had already reviewed my employment agreement. Thompson Marketing Group had a standard non-compete clause, but it specifically exempted direct employment with clients. I could leave immediately and start at Monroe without any legal issue. Even better, Monroe Industries had included in my offer letter that I would be their primary contact for the marketing campaign moving forward. They wanted to work with me, not Robert Patterson, not Thompson Marketing Group, me. Without my involvement, the Monroe contract was worthless. I had designed every element specifically around my understanding of their brand needs and market position. I was the only person who could implement the strategy effectively. Monroe knew this. I knew this. And now, James Thompson knew this too. His $47 million contract was about to disappear unless he could convince me to stay. But I was done being undervalued, dismissed, and discriminated against. I was taking my talents somewhere that actually appreciated it. Thompson Marketing Group could explain to Monroe Industries why they lost both their campaign creator and their entire account because of prejudice. The wedding venue had dissolved into complete chaos. My mother was screaming at Gerald to get away from her. Ryan sat, collapsed on the ground at the altar, destroyed. Several guests were filming everything on their phones. The video would be online within hours. Ryan family, who cared deeply about their social standing and reputation, looked absolutely devastated. Gerald's reputation in his business and social circles was finished. Everyone would know what he did. The shame would follow him forever. James Thompson was frantically making phone calls, probably trying to do damage control with Monroe Industries. Too late. I had spent 2 weeks making sure every bridge was burned before anyone realized the fire had started. I walked away from the altar, down the aisle, past the shocked faces of 300 guests. Kevin ran after me, asking what he could do to help. I told him I was fine, that I had just taken control of my own narrative for the first time in my life, that everyone who betrayed me was now facing consequences they could not escape or minimize. The satisfaction felt cold but complete. Outside the botanical gardens, I got into my car and drove away from the ruins of my old life towards something better. 2 days later, Monroe Industries officially terminated their contract with Thompson Marketing Group. The company issued a statement citing concerns about discriminatory practices and ethical violations. Local business publications covered the story extensively. Thompson Marketing Group's stock value dropped significantly. James Thompson was forced to issue a public apology and implement immediate diversity training. Robert Patterson was quietly let go 6 weeks later. The firm reputation took years to recover. I started at Monroe Industries the following Monday with a corner office, a talented team reporting to me, and the creative freedom I had always deserved. Looking back at that day in the botanical gardens, I sometimes wonder if I went too far. If public humiliation was the right response to private betrayal. Then I remember 10 years of being dismissed, overlooked, and erased because of who I loved. I remember being told I was not masculine enough, not traditional enough, not comfortable enough for clients to accept. I remember creating value that was stolen from me repeatedly while less qualified people advanced over my broken back. I remember finding the man I loved in bed with my father and having to carry that pain while pretending everything was fine at work. They wanted me silent and compliant. They expected me to absorb discrimination and betrayal without fighting back. They believed I would prioritize their comfort over my own dignity. They were wrong. My revenge was not emotional or impulsive. It was strategic, calculated, and devastatingly effective. Every person who betrayed me faced permanent consequences. Gerald lost his marriage and his reputation. Ryan lost his family standing and his social circle. Thompson Marketing Group lost their biggest contract and their credibility. I lost nothing except people and situations that were destroying me. The altar was my moment of liberation. Standing in front of 300 witnesses and speaking truth to power felt like finally breathing after years of suffocation. Prejudice relies on victims staying quiet, on swallowing humiliation to avoid conflict, on prioritizing other people's feelings over your own survival. I refused. I exposed them all. And in doing so, I reclaimed myself from the people who tried to define and control me. Your value is not determined by those who reject you. Your worth is not measured by people who demand you shrink to make them comfortable. And sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be silent while powerful people destroy you for being exactly who you are. If my story inspired you, if you have ever felt diminished or know someone who has, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we share real stories of overcoming and resistance. And if you have your own story of triumph against prejudice, share it in the comments. Your experience can inspire someone going through a similar situation. Remember, your value is not defined by others' prejudice. Your talent is greater than any barrier they try to put in your way. And sometimes the best revenge is simply being who you are without apologizing. See you in the next story, which will be even more impactful.